Hey, and welcome to the Bossed Up Podcast, episode 548. I'm your host, Emily Aries, the founder and CEO of Bossed Up. And today I want to get personal with you because I recently got an email from my aunt that I think perfectly captures something that a lot of people are wondering and maybe feeling right now when it comes to burnout and how to overcome it, and are a little bit horrified by me and the never-ending list of things that I do, because frankly, I think it's offensive to some people how many hats that I wear at one given moment. So here's the gist, okay? My aunt found out that I'd launched this pop-up porch bakery that I've mentioned here before, which I just launched about 5 weeks ago now on the north side of Denver. And she sent me this email that just made me laugh out loud. Here's what she wrote, and I'm reading from this verbatim, quote, "I cannot compute how you could possibly fit this into your schedule along with your 2 other jobs, renovating houses, and 2 little kids. It is totally beyond me." End quote. And then she asked me the 2 questions that I feel like everyone in my life has been wondering. She said, quote, "How do you do all of this and why?" And I was just so appreciative of the straightforwardness and the candor behind it, because I've been getting the same kind of questions from lots of people in my life. My mother-in-law, who takes a very different tact, was sort of like, "But Emily, you have 2 young children." Or she would say, "You don't have enough going on?" And she's got the same narrative running through her head, very different approach. And I get it. I totally get it. On paper, it's bananas, right? I have a corporate day job in leadership development. I've got you listening to this, bossed up, which, to be fair, I've scaled back and dialed back on all that I'm doing at Bossed Up in years ago now. But thank God I didn't quit, because here we are still having this conversation. And I would feel so bummed if I had quit this completely when I could just dial it back and keep it going. And on top of those 2 jobs, I have 2 young children. And so now I'm baking bread and pastries on Friday nights and Saturday mornings for my neighbors. Why on earth would I want to add to my already full plate? It perplexes people, and I get it. But here's the thing, and this is what I want to dig into today. That pop-up bakery is not draining me. It's fueling me. And I think there's something really important in that for anyone who's been told that the answer to burnout prevention is always to do less, to pull back, to subtract. Because sometimes the antidote to burnout isn't doing less, it's doing something different. So I wrote my aunt back a pretty long email, honestly, and it kind of turned into something of a personal manifesto. And that's what got me thinking that I should share this conversation here. Because I realized while I was writing it that these are the same 2 questions, how and why, that I've been getting from everyone in my life. And the why is very simple. My day job, as well paid and interesting and engaging as it is, it doesn't light me up, right? I'm good at it. I just, in fact, won a company-wide award for a new leadership program that I helped to launch last year. And they keep giving me raises and good performance reviews, but it's not exactly aligned with my sense of broader purpose, nor am I asking it to be, nor am I expecting it to be, right? And while Bossed Up certainly fulfills my sense of purpose and allows me to talk about it and work on the issues that I care most about around gender equity and equality and advancement and leadership, in so many different ways, this forum is fueling my sense of purpose. It's also just one part of the purpose that I feel in my life. And as someone who spent my entire career talking about designing a life that you love holistically, thinking about work, love, wellness, everything, right? I noticed that I was starting to feel a very specific kind of longing or searching that can happen when your head and your heart are misaligned. It wasn't burnout from too much. It was the kind of burnout that you get from having too little of the right stuff. And this bakery, as silly as it is, it's it feels sort of frivolous. It feels so much more lighthearted than the kinds of heady intellectual work that I've been doing for the rest of my career. This, not that baking is an easy endeavor by any means, but like there's just something about the bakery that scratches every itch that my knowledge economy work has never scratched. It's creative, right? I'm developing recipes, designing an experience for my neighborhood, building a brand from scratch. It's entrepreneurial. I'm figuring out pricing, managing inventory, thinking about sourcing the best ingredients at the best cost, running pre-orders, and really making a business that actually works. And it's physical. I'm working with my hands in dough, which after 8 hours of emails and meetings, it feels like a revelation. And finally, it's deeply communal. In just like 5 weeks, it's connected my family to neighbors of all ages and backgrounds in a way that nothing else has. And now to the how. And I want to be really honest about this because I do innately have a lot of energy. I always have. I'm convinced it's genetic. I'm like channeling my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, Nani, who is just full of energy. And like I remember years ago, she said to me after a certain age, Emily, you just don't want to sleep. She like didn't sleep in her later years. And I'm like, I get that. And I also think I understand why I have children that don't sleep. That would be my fault. That's definitely a gene I passed on. My kids are terrible sleepers. And so am I. And I've never been really good at resting and recovering through rest and renewal. And I don't want to apologize for that, but I do want to acknowledge that. So it's like part of my just innate biochemistry. But even with all that energy, I couldn't carve out the time for this without being really, really intentional. This did not happen by accident. I made some very deliberate trade offs to create space for this. And I just started swapping things, like deprioritizing things, even things I care about, to see what would happen in my household if I stopped holding up the sky for us. For example, laundry. I've never done so little laundry as I have in the past month. And it didn't even occur to me until I stopped that, I've been doing all of our children's laundry. And I've been the one doing all of our towels and sheets and collective communal laundering things. My husband is not malicious. He wasn't weaseling his way out of these duties. I was just stepping up and doing them, especially because I work from home on Mondays and Fridays. So it was easier for me to do. I saw a laundry pile, I tackled it. When I started the bakery, I said, look, hey, Brad, could you do your children's laundry? And of course he said, yeah, happy to. And then I realized, you've not been doing this. How interesting. We should probably like sit down and talk about that sometime. And I've just like let the ball drop on that front with the help of my husband who's picked it up the slack. I'm also like, getting down to the last of my socks and underwear before I do my laundry. So I'm just like lowering my own expectations for myself when it comes to my household labor in that front. Second of all, I'm proud of having breastfed Josephine, my youngest, until she was 18 months old. She's now just over 19 months old. But on her 18-month birthday, her year-and-a-half birthday, I quit that shit. And let me tell you, it has been so liberating. She is not a baby who is ever going to wean herself, okay? She was using me as her own personal human pacifier. She did not need my breast milk. She has never really been exclusively breastfed. She was a combo fed baby with formula and breast milk. And then at 12 months, she started drinking cow's milk like it was no big thing. But she just still was breastfeeding. And man, when I got my bodily autonomy back and just sort of said after spring break week, when you're home together all week, that week we kept it going. And then on her, right after then, she turned 18 months old. I said, I think that's it. I think I'm done. And it's been such a relief to have some time back, to have some physical autonomy back. It's like there was way more time being spent doing that than you even realize. So that was a huge amount of time that I got back all of a sudden. And then the last one here that I think is worth mentioning, and because it's kind of funny, is I really pulled back on exercise. And this doesn't sound like the advice you would normally hear from me because I've always been about wellness and exercise and the stress reduction benefits of physical movement. But I've always been an exerciser. I've always been really diligent and like committed to exercise. And I just wanted to give myself permission to chill out a little bit, like pull back. That is just not my number one priority right now. And to be clear, I still play in a volleyball league on Monday nights. Like I'm still exercising at least twice a week. I like to get walks in midweek too. So maybe it's like 3 times a week, but I'm not exercising 5 times a week anymore. And so what? Who cares? Truly, I do not. And so like pulling back on things that I used to care more about and giving myself permission to have a little space to experiment with something I think I care more about at this moment has been wildly liberating, particularly when it comes to dialing back the household sort of labor and childcare that I've been doing without even really thinking about it. So Brad has been important, and we'll talk more about his role in all of this. But I also just want to acknowledge the business model itself as a hobby slash business. This is designed for flexibility. Like I only bake Friday nights and Saturday mornings, and it's only what people are pre-ordering during the week based on limited options, like limited amounts of things that I offer. And frankly, I can skip a week whenever I want. I just skipped last week because I was traveling, and it was not a big deal at all. That being said, between the flexibility inherent to this business model and what I've deprioritized, I couldn't do any of this without my husband, Brad. So I do need to give full credit where credit is due because he is my secret weapon on so many fronts. And he deserves credit because he's my ultimate hype man. It's always been true. Like he and I came into each other's lives when we were making some big pivots and when I was starting Bossed Up. And he has always been the kind of guy who, when I come to him with a harebrained idea, and trust me, there have been many, he doesn't criticize. He doesn't raise an eyebrow. He doesn't say, "Are you sure? Do you really have time for that?" He goes, "Let's make it happen. Like, what do we need to do?" And he has stepped up around the house in a big way so that I could step into this bakery moment. He's been by my side on Saturday mornings with the kids. Like, he's genuinely excited about it. He got the vision right away. He gets the community building benefits that we're all reaping a reward on right now. And he's genuinely excited about it. And I'll say this, if you are like me, if you're I have an idea person, I highly recommend finding yourself a let's make it happen person to marry because I really do feel unstoppable with him in my corner. That being said, every other week I feel like excited and energized and hyped up about things. And then I do, like every normal person, have my moments where I feel overwhelmed and like confused about where to begin and have to shuffle things around. And when the kids get sick, or when life just happens, like there are hard trade-offs that we do have to make. So it's not like I've magically found extra time in the day, but I've tried to, within reason, exchange the things that were draining me for things that fill me up. And I have a partner who's on my side, who's like a team player in making space for me to do that. And I do want to acknowledge here for a moment the aspect of motherhood behind all of this. So a note here for the moms and for everyone who knows a mom or loves a mom. And by the way, happy Mother's Day. I got to address something that's been bugging me about this the entire time because people say this to me constantly, even people who mean it with all the love in the world. They say, "But Emily, you have 2 small children." And for a while, I just couldn't really figure out why that was bothering me so much. But it was getting under my skin. I'm like, so what? Has been my response. Like, what does that mean? Like, what are you insinuating? And I couldn't figure out what was bugging me, but I realized it was this idea that this comment assumes so much, doesn't it? It assumes that if you want to chase down a new idea, if you want to take on a hobby, if you want to start a business, that you must somehow be falling short on your motherly duties. Or you must not be showing up for your kids if your Saturday mornings are now occupied by this. And that is just not true. Okay. First of all, it's not good for my kids if my entire life revolves around them and their activities. I refuse to, and this is my philosophy with Brad. We've aligned on this as parents. We're not going to be the kinds of parents. I will laugh, I'm sure, at some point, like 10 years down the road when my kids are in high school and I'm listening back to this. But I do not want to be in the kind of household where the entire household revolves around the children's activities every single night of the week. I don't think that's healthy for the children themselves, for the world to revolve around them. And don't get me wrong, I schlep Max to dance class every Friday afternoon. We've done basketball lessons. We've done swimming lessons. We're looking into soccer teams and drum lessons and guitar lessons. Like we're doing a lot of things, but I refuse to do all of those things at once. And I refuse for my life to just revolve around my children's after school activities. Okay. That is too much of a child centric family dynamic. It's not healthy for them. And it's definitely not healthy for me. And second of all, they benefit from having a mom who's engaged in her community, who's engaged in her life, who's happy, who's fulfilled, right? Who's lit up and pursuing things that excite her. Like my children got to witness me go from an idea to making a business happen. They heard me talking about the bakery. They saw me recipe testing, right? They saw me putting everything in order and getting this idea to fruition and making something out of nothing. They get to serve coffee to their neighbors if they're feeling like it. They get to make dog treats from scratch with me and serve them to the neighbors' dogs as they walk up to the porch pop-up. I mean, they've learned to hold a conversation with a stranger, eyeball to eyeball, right? And like basically experience giving good customer service at the age of 1 and 4, respectively. That in and of itself is a valuable activity and engaging lesson to be learned there. So I reject the entire premise behind the question, oh my gosh, but how could you possibly be doing this when you have 2 young children? Because it erases the personhood of the mom in question, right? It erases the entire concept that you should have your own interests. And I understand no one means it that way, but that is how it is received on my end. And speaking of erasure, it also erases the other parent in the picture here. It's not like Brad's babysitting when he watches the kids on Saturday mornings if I'm occupied with the bakery, right? He's parenting. And so I don't see people asking men the same question. Like, how could you possibly launch your new startup? You have 2 young children. It's just like not even considered because we all assume that he's got someone covering things at home, a woman more often than not. And I know it's a fair question to ask because how the heck can any of us survive motherhood alone? And I'm not doing this alone. That's the thing. It does take a village. And I am grateful for having a village, including my parents who are in the picture and my grown siblings who are in the picture. So my children have me and they have an entire community of caregivers. So I want to say this out loud for every mom who is listening right now with a harebrained idea, with a crazy passion project, or with a spark inside you that you want to explore further. You are entitled to exploring that. You are entitled to scratching that itch. You are entitled to put down the laundry, dial back the housework, and go for it, whatever it is. Doesn't mean it's going to work out, right? But how will you know if you can't even give yourself the time or the space to try? It just does not seem fair. Your ambition is not at odds with motherhood. They can, in fact, coexist. And if anyone makes you feel like they can't, even kindly, even with the best of intentions, I just want you to notice it, name it, and move forward anyway. And now I want to get into the science behind all of this because I think it's really important to the reframing around how we think about burnout. I sat down recently with Donna Jackson Nakazawa, the acclaimed science writer behind the book Mind Drama, The Science of Rumination and How to Outwit Your Inner Defeatist. And that interview is coming out soon to the podcast here in a couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for it and subscribe now if you haven't already, so you never miss an episode. And something she and I spoke about that she really writes a lot about in her work really resonates here. Neuroscience shows that for knowledge workers, people whose jobs live primarily in their heads, for those workers, physical hands-on activity, like, I don't know, say baking breads or making cookies, it doesn't just feel restorative. It actually interrupts the neurological patterns that drive rumination, anxiety, and burnout. Here's why. When you spend your life working in your head, strategizing, emailing, problem solving, talking things out in meetings, like your brain can easily get stuck in loops, especially the rumination kind. Replaying a conversation, worrying about a project, feeling just generally anxious about nothing in particular. Research shows that when you're fully engaged in a manual task, kneading dough, for instance, it's really difficult for your brain to ruminate at the same time. I've heard other bakers on Instagram talk about this. They get into like almost a zen-like state while baking. And I totally share that. The tactile sensory engagement demands your present moment attention in a way that screen-based work does not. Your hands stay busy, your senses are fully engaged, and the mental loops quiet down. There's this saying that I've been turning to again and again that I actually included in my email back to my aunt. It's often attributed to 20th century theologian Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who said, quote, "If you work with your hands, Sabbath with your mind. If you work with your mind, Sabbath with your hands." And I've had this idea echoing in my head ever since I started baking. I think it captures something about burnout that our culture gets completely wrong. We assume that when you're stressed and burnt out, you need to rest, and that rest is defined as doing nothing. But for those of us who work with our minds all day, doing something physical and tangible and tactile can actually be the deepest kind of restorative rest that our brains can get. So here's the reframe I want to offer. We talk a lot about burnout on the show, and rightfully so, it's a huge problem. But I think we oversimplify the prescription. The standard advice is if you're burnt out, do less. And to be fair, sometimes that is the right answer. If you listen to my recent conversation with Janelle Abrahami about the millennial career crisis, her rest pathway is absolutely the right path forward if you're running on fumes. But there's another kind of burnout that doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from doing too much of the wrong things or not enough of the right things. It's the burnout of boredom, of understimulation, or just feeling like your talents are not aligned with your purpose. Your head and your heart are on different tracks. For that kind of burnout that leaves you feeling searching or longing for something, the answer is not to subtract more. It's to add something meaningful that uses a completely different part of you. And for me, that turned into a pop-up bakery. For you, it might be something totally different, a pottery class, a volleyball league, a side project, a community garden, teaching a workshop. The point isn't what it is. The point is that it engages you differently. It uses your hands if you work with your mind, and it uses your mind if you work with your hands. It connects you to people if your job isolates you, and it gives you tangible results if your job feels abstract. If you caught episode 538 on rebalancing your career portfolio, you'll recognize this as the portfolio approach to your career. I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket, right? My day job gives us, our family, financial stability. And honestly, I'm grateful for that. I do not take that for granted. Bossed Up gives me so much purpose and community as it relates to the things that I care about in a big picture kind of way around gender equality and women's leadership. And the bakery gives me creative expression, physical engagement, and neighborhood connection. And it doesn't need to become a full-time job to do that. In fact, I love that it's a tidy little business. It's a nights and weekends kind of endeavor. And that's exactly how it needs to fit into my life right now, rather than taking over my life. That is not the goal. I actually notice when I tell people about it, there's this like reflexive assumption where people think that I like assume that I want to open my own bakery one day. Even Brad asked me that. I was like, I don't think so. Full time is not necessarily my dream here. It's almost as if the only definition of success for any new venture that people can imagine is like it consuming your whole life. And I don't know why that is, honestly. I'm curious as to your thoughts. Like, can it be a meaningful, profitable, joy-giving side hustle? Because that's what it is for me right now. And this assumption that like success means all in, full time, like total commitment. Maybe that's part of what keeps people from starting their new thing in the first place. Like this idea that you have to commit or that you can't dabble, when in fact, I love a good dabble. Okay. It's like the ADHD that runs through my genetic code as well. And I love it that way. Like I really do. It's an incredible, freeing feeling that you can try something without it having to be your new full-time identity and full-time work. None of the pieces of my portfolio alone would work. Like standing alone, those things wouldn't be sufficient, but together they make up a really robust, full plate of life where I love everything on it. My plate is, in fact, fuller than ever, but it's full of the right things. So if you're listening to this and you're feeling that dull, low-grade exhaustion, not the kind where you can't get out of bed, but the kind where you just feel flat and like listless and longing for something to light you up, I want you to consider the possibility that maybe you don't need to do less. Maybe you need to reshift your energy and focus on something different. So ask yourself, what's on my plate that's draining me? And how could I trade it for something that fills me up? What would that look like? Maybe I'm doom scrolling for like 8 hours a day, like I used to, which, by the way, my screen time has cut in half since I launched the bakery and actually have something to create around instead of just consuming content, media, even TV and movies. Like that's my go to for resting at the end of the day. And it was not restful for me. And so ask yourself, like, what are you doing that you think would renew you or that you feel like is just what we assume rest and renewal looks like, but actually isn't leaving you feeling rested? Those are the first things to cut out and figure out through experimentation, through trial and error, what more active forms of rest could look like. And if that works for you. And hey, if people think you're a little out of your mind for adding something to your plate, good. You're in good company. That probably means you're on to something. And if today's conversation got you thinking more about designing a more intentional career portfolio, go back and give a listen to episode 538 for more on that. And keep an eye out for my upcoming episode with Donna Jackson Nakazawa, all about the science of rumination, which takes all of this to a deeper level. I'll drop all the links in today's show notes, and I cannot wait to hear what you think of all of this and what you make of this crazy conversation. As always, let's keep it going after the episode in the Bossed Up Courage community or in the Bossed Up group on LinkedIn. And in the meantime, let's keep bossing in pursuit of our purpose. And together, let's lift as we climb.